My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. Not sure what little technical glitch we had there. We are here to answer any type of tech career questions you may have. Maybe your goal is to become a cloud architect and it's your first job. Maybe your goal is to become an enterprise architect or an AWS solutions architect or a security architect. And that's why we're here. We're here to guide you to get your first architect job, either as someone who's not worked in tech before, which is totally fine and easy to do, or someone that's been in tech working as an engineer, for example, because the cloud architect, enterprise architect, solution architect job are often a very misunderstood role, which is a great role, but it's a special set of skills for this. And usually that's where people go wrong, is they want one of these jobs and they confuse the role with, say, engineering or another wonderful career, and they learn the skills for the other career and they struggle to get their first architect job. So that's why we're here. And I remember what it was like for me 25 years ago when I was looking to get my first tech job. And I remember that I took a lot of certifications and I remember how hard I worked, but I can also tell you they didn't get me very far. And it was certain steps that I actually had to take in order to be able to get there. So that's realistically speaking what I want you to know. I want you to know the insider secrets. I want to know how and what you need to know, where you need to get what you need, the kind of knowledge you need to get, how you can get it to ultimately get your goals. So that's why I'm here once a week, completely free here. Tomorrow we're going to have a webinar, and the webinar will be from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will discuss how to become a cloud architect. And in this webinar, we will go over what exactly is the role of the cloud architect, all the skills you actually need to have as a cloud architect, exactly what employers are looking for as a cloud architect, how you can get past the pesky HR auto rejection people when you apply for a job, and how you can be seen directly by the hiring manager. We'll talk about the skills that you have to have. And in most cases, most people won't know what these skills are, but we'll tell you what these skills are. And once you learn them, you'll have a great career ahead of you. And it's free. So we'll talk about the role for about a half an hour, and then we'll answer any questions that anyone has live on Zoom about the role, how to move into this role, whether they're coming from a nurse or a physician background, or whether they're coming from an engineering position. And I can give you examples of people that have done it from both perspectives. That's completely free. It's tomorrow, so join us. I also want to let you know that in the description of this video, we have ebooks on how to become an AI architect, or how to become a cloud architect, or how to win the interview, or certifications that are going to help support your career goals. And they're all completely free in the description of this video. So feel free to download these guides. They're completely free, and bring me questions so I can assist you in your career. I see there's one or two. Don't be shy. I've been in tech for 25 years now. I've spent more than 2 decades helping people get hired at places like Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, PNC Bank, MUFG Bank, Palo Alto Network, Zscaler, NetSpoke, Cisco, and so many other wonderful tech companies. So, Chris, bring in the first question. I'm just curious if you could talk about the stress of a cloud architect or a solutions architect compared to the stress of other tech careers. That is a really great question. So, Tuan Hughes, I'm going to tell you that the least stressful job I've ever had in my life was that as a cloud architect, solutions architect, network architect, and enterprise architect. Now, my frame of reference may be a little different. Initially, I come from, the internal and emergency medicine, so I was dealing with a little bit of stress over there. But I was a paramedic nurse and then nurse practitioner. And when I went into tech, the first job I had was as a network engineer, Tuan Hughes. And I'll say that I spent about 3 months in a senior network engineering role. That was my first job before I moved into architecture. And that senior engineering job was the most stressful job I ever had, because I was always trying to fix something that was broken, and everybody else made mistakes, and I had to be the person to come fix it. I had to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning to change software on routers or make any changes to the network when the business wasn't operational. And it was the most stressful job I had. And, I did enjoy the time as a network engineer, but that was a tough, hard job. I worked really hard. I wasn't paid that well for it. I was paid acceptably well, but the stress that existed on me was horrible. Fast forward a year later when I'm working as a senior architect, and 2 years later when I'm working as a principal architect, now my job is not stressful at all. I go and talk to someone about some technology. I ask some questions. I take the client to lunch or dinner or drinks, and I use my corporate credit card to do so, which is paid for by the company. So I get to build a relationship, ask some questions, and do which is going to be necessary that way. I build a team of people. I lead a team of people. Together, we'll respond to whatever RFIs, RFPs, RFQs need to be done from the client, like a request for proposal or a request for pricing RFQ, or a price, or just a request for information. So we do a lot of these things. So we'll lead our architecture team. We'll have some of the meetings back and forth with stakeholders. We'll have some meetings with vendors. We'll facilitate some meetings. We'll create some architectural documentation. That's our job. So to me, the architecture job is not stressful at all. But I will tell you the most stressful parts of the architecture job. There are times where you're traveling to meet a client and you're running around airports. And, when you're going to your plane and you miss your connecting flight because your first plane was late, and you're trying to leave San Francisco on the way to Dubai, and your plane is late. So by the time you get to London, you missed your Dubai flight and you're trying to figure out how to get to Dubai. That's the stressful part of the time as an architect. I will also tell the other stressful thing is there's going to be due dates and deadlines where lots of documents or proposals will need to be submitted to the client. Some of those can be a couple of hard, very little sleep nights when these issues come, but they don't happen that often. And if you manage your team well, they don't happen a lot. But that could be one of the more stressful parts. But to me, the architecture job is the least stressful job I've ever had in my life. And I've had a lot of stressful jobs, but to me, the architecture job. In fact, it's funny when I was in healthcare, I loved what I did, but I came home stressed. And then I spent 3 months in engineering, and I came home, and my wife's like, "You're stressed," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's like the world's weight was on my shoulders." And then I was an architect, and as soon as I became an architect, here was the conversation I had with my wife one day. I took her to a really nice place, and I said, "Dear, people pay me to take people to lunch, to talk to people, to guide people." And she says, "Yeah." I said, "I get paid to give speeches." And she's like, "Well, you like doing that anyway." I said, "I know, they're paying me to do nothing." And it wasn't nothing, but it never felt like work. So for me, realistically speaking, what we're really talking about is people that I think it's the greatest job in the world. And that's why I train cloud architects, enterprise architects, solutions architects, AI architects, security architects, cloud security architects, because it's a job that I love. Great question, Tuan Hughes. Chris, if you want to bring in the next one. how to become a cloud architect. So Malali, you have to learn. You have to learn two sets of things to be an architect. You have to first understand that an architect is not an engineer, and this is going to become very critical when I get to Asif's question next. So you have to understand that the architect is a designer, that the architect is a strategist, and that the architect is a planner. So here's what we actually do as cloud architects. We meet with a client's executives, typically speaking, to learn the vision of that business. Because if we don't know where the vision is going, or that business is going or is trying to go, we have no idea what kind of infrastructure they're going to need to get them there, and the kind of applications and the kind of business processes and the kind of technology solutions. So the first thing we have to do in any architecture is find where the business is going. And for that, we need to be able to communicate with executives. We need to have executive business knowledge and what's called CXO relevancy. And I train these, obviously, I train every one of these skills to our architects, but that is going to be a critical skill. Now, the next thing we do as architects is we have to go learn the business architecture. So we have to map out the way the business operates. We have to map out the organization chart. We have to map out the organization's value streams, or what gives that organization a competitive advantage. We have to map out the business processes. So once we understand the way the business is operating and how the business does things, because we can't throw tech in there without understanding that, now we need to work with the organization's key stakeholders and key business leaders. Is this the direction you want the business to go in the future? And if so, they may have to change some of those business processes, or they have to change their potential value streams, or how that organization does what it needs to. Then so what does that mean? It means you have to understand business, and you have to have some knowledge of business architecture and strategic consulting. Then when we get past that, the next thing we do as architects is create an architecture team. And it's going to be a team of people that are going to examine that organization's technology. In most cases, we deal with enterprises, and that means we could be dealing with 200,000 IP addresses, 5,000 remote locations, 1,000 different applications, complicated routing and remote access, and a whole lot. And it's going to typically take a team of 15 to 50 people to really wade through an enterprise's environment to figure out what they have. Now, then what we're going to do, if we know where the business is going and we know how the business wants to operate and we know what the technology has, now we need to take that architecture team and create a new architectural blueprint or a new strategy of what that organization's technology is going to look like in the future. So in order to do that, we need to lead that architecture team, which means these architecture leadership skills. We're going to have to get the people to create the architecture, to document the architecture, and we're going to have to be able to take that architecture, present it back to the organization stakeholders, get their feedback, and then tune the architecture with your architecture team. Ultimately, at some point when we have the finalized architecture, we have to assess the organization's readiness to adopt that architecture. Do they have the people that can build it, for example? Do they have the people that can support it? And then after that, we'll have to make sure that any of our documentation, our architectural repositories are filled with full documents. We typically have to work with the organization to create a governance structure, to work with that organization to change a change management structure. And as soon as that's done for the architect, we're typically off consulting to the new client. So in order to do this, what you're going to need to have is knowledge on how to do all those executive things. And if you get the free guide that's inside of that's in the description of this video, it'll tell you what all these things are. And if you join us in the Cloud Architect webinar tomorrow, I'll give you a complete list. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, we teach these skills, every one of those last skills that I told you. If you want to be an architect and you don't have those business skills, you won't be hired. So if you don't want to train with us, go get a master's in business administration, or go take some executive leadership skills and things. That's what I did many years ago, because there was not a course like I have now. I went and got an MBA and took training in CXO relevancy and leadership and sales and executive presence and all those things I'm telling you about. Now, the next thing is you have to learn the underlying technology. And by the underlying technology, the technology that you're going to use to create your strategy. Now, architects don't configure anything, so it's not how-to. So there's no coding, there's no Python, there's no Linux, there's no DevOps, there's none of that stuff for the architect. But you have to understand the network, because you have to be able to design it. So that means like things knowing like IP addressing, subnetting, route summarization, how routing works, BGP, VLANs, VLAN tagging, VLAN trunking, What type of wide area network should you choose, for example? When do you use a private line versus a SASE WAN versus a IPsec tunnel versus a software-defined WAN? And then it's like, same thing, you would need to understand compute. What are your compute options? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your compute options, for example? When would you use a virtual machine? When would you use a container? What are your options with regards to container orchestration? When would it be great to use something like application virtualization? When would it be great to use something like a function as a service function, like a Lambda function or an Azure function? And we'd have to go down the list of all of those skills. So it's network, data center, security applications. And I actually do that tomorrow on the webinar. So why don't you join us for that webinar? And on that webinar, I'll give you the entire list of skills. Of course, we train them all. And when people train with us, they can stay in our training program until they're hired, because we want all of our students to get to their goal. And the goal is having a great cloud architect career, if that's the person's goal, or enterprise architect career, or whatever. So that's how I would do it. Join me tomorrow, download that complete guide, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about developing the skills of a planner, of a strategist, because architects are strategists. What would make a great profile in a current job market where mostly experience is favored? Well, Steve, here's the reality. In a market where experience is favored, the only thing that really looks good in a job profile is another architect job. And Steve, I'm going to tell you this, engineering has absolutely nothing to do with architecture. And I say this, and I love what engineers do. So Mosif, Moise, in an architecture, I want you to get this person to put it in your perspective. You're going to have 1,000 different moving parts. So let's say we deal with an enterprise. You're going to have 3 clouds, 10 security and networking vendors, at least 100 application vendors, typically speaking. You're going to have users spread on 4 or 5 different continents. You're going to have a couple 100,000 IP addresses, and you're going to have all these thousands of remote access locations. You're going to have all these weird AI applications going on, big data applications going on, all kinds of complicated networking going on, and all kinds of complicated security. Now, architecture is the whole big picture. And no one that's engineering will ever get to see more than 1 or 2% of that picture because they're focused in. So let's talk about, let's say you are a network engineer, for example, and I love network engineering. I have a network engineer, and the network engineer configures things all day. There's a reason I'm saying this. And I routinely interview network engineers with a Cisco certified internet expert with 20 years of network engineering experience. And then I interview them for a network architect job. And I will ask them architectural questions. And if I were to ask someone, let's say I was going to design an MPLS backbone, I might ask someone the architectural questions, talk to me about the architectural options I have to create a MPLS network. And I would need that person, for example, to say, well, the first thing we need is a single area link state protocol, such as single area OSPF or a single area ISIS environment, because we need all these link states. The next thing we would have to use is a signaling protocol such as TDP or LDP to push the labels around. The next thing that we would need to consider is, do we need to arrange our traffic ahead of time? And if so, do we come up with primary and backup paths? Do we need to guarantee bandwidth? And if so, we can use something like RSVP signaling to guarantee bandwidth. Now, where are the MPLS things going to egress the network? Do we need to be worried about the CPU on these routers? If so, should we pop the label on the penultimate router or the last router, because either one of these things could have here? Now, why are we using this MPLS in the first place? Are we trying not to have IBGP full mesh peering because we're just pushing a, you get the point, Mo. So what the point is engineering does not provide any architecture background. So I'll give you some examples of people. So I've had people that I consider to be really strong engineers. Jawad came to me as a cloud engineer with about 8 years experience. It took me about 9 months and he got hired by AWS. By comparison, Ivan Tamba and his friend Jordan Katil came to me. They were both college students, never worked in tech, and they were hired by AWS in about 6 months, a little less than Jawad with all of Jawad's wonderful cloud engineering experience. I can tell you that Lenny was a video editor. He was hired as a cloud architect long faster than some of the engineers I've had with 10 and 15 years experience. Because here's what we do as an architect. And I'll ask you if you think anybody in engineering is really doing these things. So the question is, we're performing impact analysis of making a change in one part of the system and performing in another part of the system. We're creating a strategic roadmap where we're basically going to take the company from architecture 1 to architecture 2 to architecture 3, which would be the transition architectures one would have along the way. We have to map out the business architecture, which is inclusive of the organization, the way the organization operates, key business processes, and key value streams. Because if we don't get that involved, guess what? The architecture is going to fail to provide any value for the business. Here's another thing we do as architects is we have to communicate with the key stakeholders across the organization, get their feedback, get their input. And we also have to, for example, work with those stakeholders to get their acceptance and buy-in of our solution, because around any architecture, we'll need some cultural changes, and we'll need the key stakeholders and key organization influencers to support it. Now, I'll tell you what you will do as an architect is you're going to be having meetings with executives, and you're going to be trying to find the right problem. So you'll be in these meetings, and what you're going to be doing is generating a lot of hypotheses, these mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive hypotheses, and being able to test various parts to get to the right problem. You will be quantifying risk. You will be building disaster recovery planning and business continuity planning and safety planning, but the engineering doesn't have a lot to do with it. So I can tell you, I've trained engineers and I've trained architects and I've trained nurses and other people. The people, the best profile that have had the easiest times that I've trained becoming an architect are salespeople. So I have Al, for example, that was a sales rep for Kimberly-Clark. Next thing he knows, I trained him, and about a year and a half later as a senior solutions architect at Deloitte. Or Jermaine, he was selling landscaping gear, took our course, and about 9 months later, he's working as an enterprise architect. Or I could say Wallace Agana, for example, who again was another sales rep, and he took our training, and within about 9 months, he was hired by JPMorgan Chase as an enterprise architect. I can also tell you that healthcare people like Jennifer, for example, and Noah, for example, easily got hired because in health, and I'll tell you why healthcare people next. So who are the people that have the easiest time getting hired? The people that have the best communication skills, the people that have the best sales skills, the people that have the best presentation skills. They are the first ones to get hired because architecture is a career of gathering information. It's about building a team, leading a team. So that's what I'm looking for. And that's what employers are looking for. I've seen employers basically, and I've done interviews with employers where we interview some people that are so technically smart. And here's the response of the hiring managers and the team, especially if it's a panel presentation. Techie, but can't sell. We'll have to pass. Techie, but can't sell. We'll have to pass. And all of a sudden, you get someone whose technology skills are a third of the others, but they've got good executive skills, good sales skills, good presence, good CXO relevancy. And poof, they're hired. So good consulting skills, the ability to ask questions, the ability to be open-minded, the ability to obtain or elicit information, the ability to organize, the ability to lead a team, the ability to close and sell the billion-dollar deal, because when you're in architecture, you have to sell it. And if you can't sell it, all you're left with is blueprints. So that's typically what employers are looking for. And that's why it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. We have people getting hired with no experience. It's about having the right skills. Having the right skills. Like Arun, who never worked in tech before, who was working in Home Depot, who got hired by TELUS as a solutions architect, or Vladimir, who was a 24-year-old college student hired by North Highland as a solutions architect after our training. What matters is, can you do the job? Consulting, yes, same job. Sales, similar. Now, the sales engineer is like a rough around the edges solutions architect or cloud architect. And what I mean by rough around the edges, the sales engineer is typically more techie, and they have to be a little better hands-on because a sales engineer might actually build the proof of concept. And when you focus more on the tech, you focus less on the soft skills, the leadership, the executive. So when people often leave engineering, sales engineering roles and move into architectural roles, it's all about polishing up their sales skills, polishing up their empathy, emotional intelligence, leadership, executive presence. And then poof, somebody goes from a $200,000 sales engineer job to a $350,000 architect job. But generally speaking, the only job that's similar to an architect job is an architect job or a management consultant job, often called the business architect job. Hope that helps. Which is best, cloud architect or cloud engineer? Well, I don't know what best is. So the bigger question you have to do is determine what's right for you. Now, I will tell you, you will have the opportunity to earn 3 or 4 times more over the life of your career becoming a cloud architect than you ever would as an engineer. I will also tell you that while I love cloud, while cloud engineers are required, and while I love cloud architects and cloud engineers, we had a wonderful cloud engineering program, and our organization stopped selling it 2 years ago. So I want you to understand why we stopped selling it. The architect meets with a client. The architect has to lead a team of people. The architect has to sell. The architect has to communicate. All these things, for example, right? So these are things that cannot be replaced by technology. We have the engineering skills like writing a Python script or a Terraform script or a Bash shell script. AI can do that. And these are very low value skills by comparison, unless somebody wants an admin job. So it's nothing for me to see somebody become a cloud architect as a $160,000 or $70,000 job, a couple years later being a $300,000 architect job, and move into bigger and better jobs. Engineering caps out. The other reason engineering caps out is the architect, you have to be somewhat local. And it doesn't matter where my people write my Python scripts. They can be in Abu Dhabi, which is a beautiful place. They can be in Bangalore, India, which is another beautiful place that I've spent time into. They can be in Cambodia, they can be in Cameroon, or they can be in California. But what the person gets paid is going to be geographically dependent and based upon the cost of living. So understand, if you're in an engineering job, you're going to always have to compete with the global market and be outsourced to the global market, but you can't be outsourced as an architect. If you also understand that the architect has a lot of business acumen and leadership as part of his role, architecture roles naturally go towards VP roles or C-suite roles like CIOs or CTO roles. By comparison, for example, engineering roles typically beget more technical roles and more other technical roles, unless the engineer switches over and goes and gets an MBA and starts learning business skills and then move into management. So it all depends on what you like. If you want to touch the technology and you want to basically work with Linux all day and work with Python and work with Bash shell scripting and work with Terraform and be configuring things, working on a cloud provider's command line, and you want to do that all day, that's the job of the cloud engineer. And for that, skills related for that would be Terraform, they would be scripting, they would be containers and container orchestration, DevOps tools, obviously knowledge of the network and the data center, good, strong Linux skills, good, strong Windows administration skills, and good hands-on cloud skills. Now, for the architect, for example, Python's irrelevant. Bash is irrelevant because it's a different kind of career. Now, but that architect needs good sales skills, good leadership skills, good executive presence, good emotional intelligence, good underlying knowledge of the network and the data center, good strategic design and applications to the design, the ability to lead, the ability to grow, the ability to sell, the ability to present. Now, I can tell you, if you ever find yourself on the side of a supply and demand curve, it's a lot easier to find a technical person like an engineer than it is to find an architect that's a balanced person that's a 2/3 executive, but still has 1/3 technology professional strength. But really, at the end of the day, you have to love what you do. You have to love what you do. And that's the key. But and as long as you know what you want to do and you get the right skills for the job you want to do, you'll be in good shape. Hope that helps. Join us for the architect webinar. We'll cover the role and maybe you'll like it. Maybe you won't, but we'll go over it in depth. Thanks for your suggestion and help. Can I help you become a cloud architect with zero experience? Of course I can. And I do it all the time. I helped Naformi in the UK get his first job as a chief technology officer with no background. And for example, and that's an example. But let me give you another. Pierre D. And he went from a sailboat operator, for example, to a solutions architect. And I can give you other examples as well. And I've given other examples, but of course I can. You're just going to have the right training. and we'd be happy to provide the right training. And by the way, we don't do any coding in architecture world. There is no coding, there is no scripting, there is no Python, there is Linux, there is no touching the technology as an architect ever. You're designing a strategy to help that organization optimize their business performance. You'll be facilitating meetings, you will be leading large teams. Now you'll be writing a lot of documents in Word and PowerPoint and Excel. You'll be building business cases. You'll be facilitating meetings, but you're not going to be touching the technology. You may draw some architectural diagrams on things like Visio, Lucidchart, Draw.io. Potentially, you'll be mapping out business and workflow processes or value streams. But no, you're not going to be coding ever. And it's a good thing because coding careers can be done by AI. Dingleman, you have an interview for a senior security architect position with the hiring manager. What would you do to prepare for this? So, Dingleman, I know you. We got you your first security job at a great company, and now all of a sudden you're interviewing for a senior security architect position. I love it. So, Dingleman, I know you, and you are really smart. So, what you really need to be able to do is do two things. One is you need to show competency, that you understand what really goes into it. So that means you need to be able to understand the entire security strategy and be able to explain it. Explain, for example, what the network security strategy is in your options, to be able to explain what types of data loss prevention options you have, what type of, say, SIEM type options you have, and how and where that would integrate into the solution. What type of identity strategies could you use, IAM strategies that could fit into the entire security solution. Make sure that you're able to explain where cryptography and the types of cryptography would fit into that organization's overall security picture. Be able to talk about business continuity plannings and all the elements from the people to the protection to the disaster recovery environments that are related to the technology. And being able to just show that you understand the big picture of all the tools and triggers and things that you could do to do that, both from physical security there. Now, the next thing that they're really going to be looking to in an architect position is not only your ability to understand the tools and have knowledge of the design, is you're not going to design your security architecture by yourself as a general rule. I mean, there are people that get an entire CCIE, which is like 75,000 pages on just network security with Cisco, but that doesn't include identity access management and other heavy-duty security things for the most part that are there, and other options that Cisco didn't necessarily have product sets for. And there's application security, secure coding practices, the vulnerability scanning and management that needs to go. That's being able to find out what your weakness is when you're bringing in systems, when you're bringing in ethical hackers. So your knowledge of the big picture. The next thing is you want to look like you have no bias. The most dangerous person in the world, I always say, is the 13x AWS certified person or the 13x any other vendor certified person. Because the certification gives you a science fiction-y view of the world and a proprietary view for the world. I need people without bias. So I don't care whose certifications you have. If we're talking data loss prevention strategies, understand what options there are and your alternatives that you can use. If we're talking next generation firewalls, understand the difference between signature protection versus behavioral anomaly type protection, and which you would use and which offers you different protection levels and why. So there's that. Now, the next thing I'm concerned about is your ability to lead a team. Now, in most cases, I really care about your ability to sell. Dingleman, I think you're going to do a good job here. You come across very charming. You've got good charisma, and you're very likable. So I think you'll be good here. Plus, we've worked with you on certain things. So again, this is going to be very helpful to you, and I would work on that. I'd make sure that your elevator pitch of who you are and how you can help an organization is crisp. And I would really think about how you could answer the questions. Okay, how could you assist that organization? What is it that you know that could help them better manage risk? What is it that you know that can bring their team better? What is it that you can do? Because Dingleman, we all have some special traits about us that are good. I'm really good at getting information, for example. Apparently, all my time in healthcare asking patients questions made it to people just telling me everything. So if that's my strength, I could use that as, one of my abilities is to really get information. And it's the kind of information that protects you from the gotchas, that makes your architecture successful, that makes clients happy. But you got a couple of special things about you. Figure out how you're going to use them to show the employer. And also, Dingo, man, I want them to see the energy that I've seen with you. I want them to see that energy, enthusiasm, and passion. I want to see them to see how willing you are to go above and beyond, and how willing you are and how hard you're willing to work to be great at what you do. Because that's what I see in you, and that's what I'm looking for. So that's what I would do to prepare for it. I think you'll do great. Yes. You recently got your AWS Cloud Practitioner certification and now learning Python programming. What are some projects you should do to break into experience for Cloudfield, even if you have to work your way up? You have been interested in the Solutions Architect Associate since you have a sales background, also an AWS developer. Okay, so Roger, I'm going to work on the assumption that you want to be a architect. But, because you said you have been interested in SAA, which is a Solutions Architect Associate, which is just a certification. So I'm going to work on the assumption that when you said you've been interested in SAA, because you have a sales background, that your desired goal is a solutions architect. If that's not the case, please tell me. The first thing I need you to understand is if you're going to do a project, here's what I need it to show. I need your project to show relevant work experience. So what I mean by this is if you are an interior designer, your projects and portfolios would look like houses or kitchens or remodels that you've actually done. If you are an airplane pilot, your portfolio would show the different kinds of planes you've flown, the distances you've flown, the types of challenging environments you've flown in, and that would show your airline pilot experience. If you wanted to be a software engineer, all the software you wrote would be great experience for your work. But here's the problem. Architects don't touch the technology, and you can touch the technology all day long, and you will never learn anything about architecture. And that's why I want you to understand why. And when I explain it to you, I think you'll understand why. And if not, I really want you to join us for our webinar tomorrow. But please don't learn Python. Please don't get a developer associate. And the reality is, Roger, when I have people that want to be solutions architects as their job, and they have the developer associate, the SysOps associate, and the DevOps associate, I often have a very hard time getting them hired. And I can think of one of my particular clients that had all those certifications. He had all this Python on his resume, and he kept going on interviews for architects, and every single time they said no to him. He was in Canada, and he wasn't working in tech before, but he did like to code, and he learned to code, and he was very good at it. And he comes to class, and I said, Arun, I say, can I redo your resume in class? And he said, sure. I said, can I take all the DevOps, the SysOps, the Python, the this, can I take it all off of your resume? And Arun's like, but I worked hard for it. I said, I know. I said, but I need to take it off of your resume. I said, Arun, I said, have you responded to an RFI, RFP, RFQ assessment? And Arun said, yes. I said, Arun, have you delivered a sales presentation to the C-suite, to the board? I said, yes. I said, did you present any architectures that were for high availability status? And he said, yes. I said, did you create an architectures for banks, healthcare organizations, social media providers, big data architectures, AI architectures? And Arun said, yes. I said, good, put that on your resume. I said, Arun, did you help co-author a training publication with me? And Arun said, yes. Okay, great. And then I said, Arun, have you done any mentoring, any of this or any of this? And he said, yes. I said, that's what we put on your resume. We get rid of all this other stuff. You know what happened? He had 3 different interviews with 3 different companies and 3 different job offers because he had the skills of an architect and he had the right thing. So what I want you to do is, and if you were with us, we would give you actual architectural projects and they would reflect what we do as architects. You'd have RFI, RFP, RFQ responses. You'd have architectures, you'd have presentations, you'd have architectural documents and things that you've created over time. You'd be able to talk about presentations. You'd be able to describe creating architectures for various business problems, and you would be just fine. So we have to, for these roles, we have to get you the right roles, and then we have to get you the certifications. Now, certifications do not teach architecture. What you need to learn here is you need to learn the network and the data center, because if you understand the network and the data center, you understand all clouds. You can't just learn AWS. There's no jobs for that. 98% of enterprises use more than one cloud, and 89% of all companies use more than one cloud, which means 2/3 of the stuff that are in your certifications are no longer usable. They don't work multi-cloud. But it also means that you need to understand virtual machines, not EC2. Because if you understand a virtual machine and you understand how the hypervisors work and the types of processors in virtual machine, you'll understand AWS's EC2, Azure's virtual machine, Oracle's virtual machine, Google's compute engine instance, because everybody's multi-cloud anyway. And if you understand containers and container orchestration, it won't matter if you're a Nutanix cloud, an OpenStack cloud, an Alibaba cloud, a Dell cloud, an HP cloud, the AWS cloud, Cloudflare, Google, because it's the same technology. And if you understand block storage, object storage, and file storage, guess what? It's the same storage we used in every data center for the last 30 to 40 years, and it still works today, and it's still what's on the cloud. And if you learn BGP, it's the same BGP on all networks, all data centers, and all cloud providers. And that's what you learn, and that's going to be your skills. Then we get you 2 or 3 certifications, like the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. Just get one of them. It's not going to be hard if you're well trained. Then get a TOGAF 10, which is an architectural framework. Then maybe even a CISSP, which is what we provide everybody with for security. And you'll have people knocking at your door too. But as long as you get those leadership skills, business skills, and do the right projects, you'll be good. But no amount of Python and scripting is going to help. And here's the reason why. So let's say someone decides that they're going to do, and it's my favorite, I see it, everybody's cloud project that'll never get somebody hired. And they talk about having somebody build a WordPress website on AWS. And what is it the person's learning by this hands-on lab? They're learning, well, first, they have to launch a virtual machine. Good. Then they'll probably launch a Linux machine. So the next thing they have to figure out is how do they update the operating system, like sudo apt-get update. And then they have to install a web server on that server. So maybe it's a sudo apt install HTTPD or Apache or Nginx or whatever that command is. And then the person has to figure out how to connect that virtual machine to an internet gateway. And then poof, they're connected to the internet. And the person learned how to configure the Linux machine, install the web server, update the application, set up the basic networking and the internet connectivity. Great. Now, do you know which part of that the architect will ever be concerned with? None of that. Now, Roger, here's what the architect does care about. What are the customer's goals out of the application? What business challenge needed to occur? What does the application workflow or the process workflow need to be to get the right outcomes that we're looking for in this application? Should this application be hosted in a data center? Should it be hosted in a single cloud, hybrid cloud, or hybrid multi-cloud? Now, what are the uptime requirements of this? What are the latency sensitivity? How much latency is tolerable? Can the application tolerate variations in latency? What level of packet loss can the application handle? Now, how am I going to secure this? What do I put this in my demilitarized zone? What types of firewalls do I need? How many layers in firewalls do I need? Do I use IDS, IPS systems? Or am I going to aggregate my logs somewhere into a SIEM system? And what kind of SIEM system might I be using? What's the compute requirements of this server? How much CPU requirements? How much cores? How much DRAM do I need? What is the storage performance? What is the network performance? So see, Roger, in one case, I'm focused on how to do something. In another case, I'm learning all the elements of planning. So there is none of those hands-on labs will carry. And Roger, that's why when I've got people with 20 years of engineering experience, they can become great architects. They really can, and they have a lot of technology. But it takes me about 6 to 12 months to train them to be an architect. And when I've got a sales rep, it takes me about 6 to 12 months to train them as an architect. Because there's a lot of elements to this job. 2/3 of the job are executive. 1/3 of the job is tech, but it's not hands-on how-to tech. It's knowledge tech. It's strategy tech. It's the how the person designed the airplane, not how would the person fly the airplane. And that's why in the real world, the construction workers that build things don't get asked to design the building, the shopping mall. The architect that knows how to build nothing, that knows how to design the plans and the blueprints, is developing the strategy. They create the blueprints, maybe a little model, what it's going to look like, and then somebody else comes in and builds it. Identical role for the architect. You would like to ask about our new security architect program. Can you enroll if you don't have any cybersecurity or cloud experience? Of course you can. You would like to transition into tech as a mid-career change. Why not? I transitioned from being an internal medicine nurse practitioner to an architect 25 years ago. So we have a tremendous number of our people that have attended our program with no background and gotten great security architect jobs. Delroy Batt was an emergency medical technician. He took our security program. I'd say he was in our security program for about 2 months, picked up an engineering job, finished our security program, and got hired by CDW as a cloud security architect. Poof. I can tell you that R recently got a very serious security architect job, and his background was in media and not on the tech side of the media. I can tell you Q got a great security architect job, and I can tell you I've trained a tremendous number of people as security architects. Here's the thing. Every one of us starts out with no experience. The architect role is very much like the physician role. It's a role that needs to be taught. So nobody's born with any knowledge as people. I promise you, nobody was born knowing how to do surgery. No one knows how to fly an airplane. And I guarantee you, no one knows how to design and optimize cloud architecture to optimize business without someone teaching them. It's taken me hundreds of thousands of dollars of education, 25 years, and a whole lot of training and experience and work with others to be at the position that I'm at. And I can make it clear it should be pretty easy for us to get you properly trained, get you hired as an architect. And I think right now we're still offering it 50% off because this is a pre-launch program, which is going to launch this month, which we are super, super, super excited about. And I'd love to see you in class. If you have questions, you can either attend our architect webinar tomorrow, and I'll happily speak with you in person in that architect webinar, or you can schedule a session to speak with someone from our team, and my team will drop the link of that calendar in case you want to do so. If you've got questions about the career, please ask. You think it's one of your problems you don't like to sell or talk too much. If you want to be an architect, you really, really, really need to learn how to sell. JDF Craze, I'm going to give you the best advice that was given to me in my entire life. And I'm going to tell you when I was given this advice. It was about 20 years ago, and I am an introvert. I really am. You wouldn't know it, but I am an introvert. Now, it was about 28 years ago, and I was practicing internal medicine, and I had a patient that had a very dangerous heart rhythm. It was called AFib, and left untreated within a year, a substantial number of patients with AFib develop a massive stroke and are permanently disabled. So at the time, there were very few medications that I could have prescribed my medication. The real only option was Coumadin, which is a blood thinner, which makes the person bleed and not clot, which is why we're prescribing it. Now, the same medication, Coumadin or warfarin, is also used for rat poison because the rats eat it and they bleed to death. So I was very young. I was early into my medical career, and I had to give somebody Coumadin and convince them to take it, and they knew it was rat poison. And you know what? I'm going to tell you right now, it was very challenging for me to convince that patient to take that medication. In fact, I couldn't do it. And thankfully, there was a physician in the office that had known the patient for many years before I had joined. The physician had about 30 years experience, and the physician walked in the room and said, if you don't take this medication, you're going to be permanently disabled within the next year. Is that the way you want to live? And the patient said, no. Mike didn't tell me that. No, that's not ever going to be my sales tactic. If you don't do this, you're going to die or something like that. Or at least I hope it's not my sales tactic. But what he said to me at that point changed my life forever. He said, I need you to learn to sell. He handed me a book by Dale Carnegie that was in his office, the physician's office, that said how to win friends and influence people. And he said, the more you learn how to sell, the more likely you'll be able to influence your patients to take their medication, lose weight, exercise, stop smoking, and do whatever lifestyle changes are necessary. So I learned sales then. You know what? When you've got better sales skills, you can sell yourself into a job. You can sell yourself into a higher salary. And you can even convince your wife which restaurant you want to go to dinner. And I use my sales skills every single time because my wife's in charge, and I'm totally happy to admit it after we're married basically 30 years. But sometimes if I really want to go where I want to go, I have to turn on my sales skills. So sales skills are something that'll help you in every aspect of your life. Chris, bring in the next one. It's convenient. And if you've got questions, please ask them. We really, really will do want to help. Don't hesitate. You're currently working as a senior IT engineer. What do you need to do to prepare for a cloud architect role? Recently, you got an opportunity to migrate from AWS from on-premise. I think you're saying, and now working in DevOps. So LinkedIn user, what you're describing to me is engineering. And there's another question here that's also being talking about really good hands-on experience with compute and storage and engineering. So I want to talk about why you're going to need to get architecture training, and you'll be able to get your architecture training out separately. But I'm going to answer yours first, and then I'm going to answer the second one. And if you don't get architecture training per se, there is business training that you're going to need. And here's the reason why. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I want you to think about. Could you answer? And this would be for Danish, although I'm going to answer your questions separately, but also for the LinkedIn user that posed this question. I want you to think about this. If I were to ask you, what are the key elements of an organization's business architecture? Could you answer that? Because if you don't know how to map out the organization's business architecture, the second you introduce technology, you could break the organization. Now, if you could tell me that you understood business architecture was evaluating the way the organization operates, for example, the org chart, the key business processes, value streams, and things that give that organization's competitive advantage, then you'll be in a better position to think about the technology strategy. But so there's that. If I were to ask you and tell you that an organization's weighted average cost of capital is 8%, how would you use that 8% weighted average cost of capital to determine if it's in the customer's best interest to use a Nutanix cloud, an OpenStack cloud, or use a public cloud like AWS or Azure? Could you answer it? If I were to ask you this question, could you, that we have 1 million hits per minute on a bank's website. The bank's website has a total of 37 million users. Could you create the most secure demilitarized zone for that website? What would your architectural strategy be? Could you answer that after being hands-on for 20 years? Or if I asked you, we have 3 direct connections going to AWS. We would like to load share on these direct connections without getting out of order packets. Could you describe that? Now, the answer I'm expecting to get is no. And here's the reason no. Because learning how to do something and how to build it typically doesn't teach you how to design it. So what you're really going to need is you're going to need 2 different things. You're going to need the business skills. Now, the business skills are going to be as follows. And you can get these from any Master's in Business Administration program like I did. And some of these skills you're going to have to get as executive training if you're not with us. If you're with us, we would train you on these things. The first thing that you have to understand is you must know business. Because as the architect, they don't hire us for the tech. We think they hire us for the tech, but they're hiring us to come up with a strategy, a plan, to help that organizations be more effective, compete competitively, to give them a competitive advantage. And what goes into giving an organization a competitive advantage? Well, the organization has 3 main elements of business. It's people, it's processes, and it's technology. And your job as an architect is to optimize all 3. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you have 100,000 people in an organization. If they all did things their own way, some people would be efficient, some people would be a train wreck. So what we do as architects on the business architecture side is we have to help figure out what is the right process, what is the best and most efficient way to do things. And that's part of the business architecture, is getting that. And then the next part of what we do as architects is, if we've got the employees and now the employees are doing it great because they're doing it in the most efficient way. Now, how do we architects supercharge those organizations' employees? By giving them the best technology and tools to do it better. So if we've got a sales rep that can sell 10 million a quarter, can we give that sales rep tools to make them sell 30 million a quarter or 40 million? So that's the architect's job, to align the people, the processes, and technology in a fair and a non-biased manner. So what does that mean? It means you need to understand business, understand the business elements. Now, it also means you're going to need to lead, because engineering is a job you do yourself. Architecture is the entire picture, which means you're going to need a team. So even if I was a network engineer and I have a CCIE number, which I do, if I was going to lead a big architecture, I would not focus on the network. I would focus on the big picture, the cloud architecture, the enterprise architecture, get myself a network architect, some network engineers, some security architects and security engineers. Even that's my background too. I'd get some big data architects. I would get some big data engineers, some AI architects, some machine learning people, some data scientists. I'm going to bring in some DevOps engineers, some software developers. So, and some IAM architects, some database people. So I'm going to create my architecture team. So as the architect, I need to lead that team. Now, as an architect, I need to lead that team to run baselines of organizations' technology. I need to lead that architecture team to create the architecture. I will need to know how to respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, which is a type of document when companies send proposals. You will need to know how to do. You will need to be presenting, because you're going to present at conferences. You're going to present to the board potentially. You'll present to the C-suite. You'll be presenting at executive briefings. You're going to be presenting to technical teams. You're going to be presenting. And if you've got a good tech background, go get these skills. Now, most of those are going to be those business skills, those consulting skills that are going to be there. And on the technology side, generally speaking, as an engineer, you know how to build the stuff. But now I don't need you to build the stuff. I need you to focus on how the stuff works and which parts of the stuff you can tune and you can modify. For example, and when I say it won't teach it to you, I like to say that most people right now are using their computer or their phone right now. And I would like to say that most people on this call have either spent 10,000 hours using their computer or 10,000 hours using their phone inside of their lifetime, which makes them an expert at using their computer and using their phone. 10,000 hours in one thing. Now, I would like to ask those people that are experts at using their computer, how many of them can tell me about the architecture of the computer they're working with right now? Could you tell me about the chipset that's on the motherboard of your computer? Could you tell me about the CPU that it has? Could you tell me about the frequency of each core, the power that's going to the CPU? Could you tell me about the number of cores that are there? Could you tell me about the core-to-core communication inside of your CPU? Could you talk to me about the impact of your CPU's level 1, level 2, and level 3 cache on performance? Could you talk to me about how that CPU impacts and gets information from the DRAM on the computer, or how how information is retrieved from a SATA port versus a SAS port versus an NVMe storage interface on that device? Could you talk to me about the number of PCI lanes on that CPU and how that pertains to the number of PCI devices like GPUs you could use and how that would impact machine learning performance? See, using doesn't teach you this. So that's really what we're actually talking about, is you need to learn the underlying technology. You need to learn the underlying technologies, how it works and how it fits together. You generally don't get that as an engineer. As the engineer, you're generally building it. So what I would do is the following. I would either find people that could train me for architecture. Now, the reality is I didn't have anybody to train me for architecture 20 years ago when I was a senior engineer, but I can tell you what I did. I was lucky enough in those days that I had done 3/4 of an MBA, and I had enough good sales skills from medicine, and I had I had good levels of emotional intelligence from practicing medicine. And I got my architecture roles. I got my first solutions architect job 25 years ago. I developed a lot of business acumen. I remember reading business books every day of the week, and I had moved up to a principal architect. And still then, it was they were the least paying jobs of my entire career. And then I had a manager, and the manager, it was back in, I think it was around 2002. And my manager pulled me into an office, and I'm going to give you this advice because I think it's pertinent to you. My manager pulled me into his office, and Mike, he said, stop worrying about certifications, stop worrying about this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. And he said, if you want to go from that $150,000, junior level solutions architect or regular level solutions architect, in his mind, it was a junior level role for me, even though it was not a junior level role. And he said, if you want to move into like a $300,000 enterprise architect role, you're going to need to change something, Mike. He says, your technology only got you so far. And he said, for you, it's not the technology piece of the architecture where you're going to thrive. He said, Mike, you've got better communication skills. He said, your leadership skills are good, but they're not good enough. He said, you to go to the top, to get someone to be a CIO or a CTO, to really get people to their goals. It's not about what you can do yourself, Mike. It's about the impact you can make. My manager then said, if you have a team of 50, you're a lot stronger than you being a team of 1, no matter how good you think you are. You're better as a team of 50. And then my manager said, what kind of impact do you want to make to your clients? He said, do you want to make a tech impact where the tech works, or do you want to make a change to their business where it's life-changing and business-changing? And you can save people's jobs or create new jobs because the company has more money to hire them as opposed to laying people off. And I said, I want that. And he said, so you need to make an impact. He said, go to business school, learn business, we'll help pay for it. I'll also send you to management and leadership training and executive presence training and sales training. I even got an executive coach. Practically overnight, I was into these bigger, more executive roles. And what I ultimately learned, LinkedIn user, with some point was I finally got into the role. I was asked to do the scariest thing that ever happened. My manager said, Mike, now that you're in a big role, can I take the Cisco certified internet expert, and could you take the CISSP off of your business cards? I was like, what? Hardest certification in the world? The 2 most valuable certifications in the world? And my manager said, are you an executive, Mike, or are you a techie? Do you want to be perceived as an executive, or you don't want to be perceived as techie? What kind of impact do you want to make in your life, Mike? Drop the CCAE, drop the CISP, got an executive coach, changed what I wore, and then my career took off like this. Ended up becoming a chief architect for a huge vertical at a huge enterprise organization. And it was the thing that changed my life, and I loved every last minute of it. So you're going to have to get it, whether you go get an MBA like I did and then get a training on executive training, leadership, sales, and there's there. And then there's the other side of it. You don't want to be perceived as an engineer. And what do I mean by this? So I love engineers. Without engineers, nothing works. Nothing works. Engineers are very valuable people. But the reason organizations hire architects are for the following reasons. They're looking for someone to bridge the gap between the C-suite and the tech teams. Now, as an engineer, you know how engineers think, which is wonderful. So once you can think like a business executive and you have that business knowledge, you'll be able to translate very well between business executives and the engineering team. That will be a strategic advantage for you later. But in the meantime, when they hire someone, they're looking for someone that looks like an executive, that walks like an executive, that talks like an executive. And I can tell you, when I wanted to move into my bigger architecture roles, and I wanted to get out of those entry-level solutions architect roles, even though I was a principal solutions architect. But when it comes to architectural roles, the solutions architects are the most junior as a rule of the bunch. And I can tell you, swapping out my shirts like this, because this is the way I like to dress, with Armani and Canali suits. I can remember going and learning, having extra training on which fork to use. And I'm not literally joking. And I got training on wine and training on Scotch selection. And I got training on pairing food and wine, and learned how to play golf, because these were the things that were much more important in my architecture career. Ways to develop a relationship, ways to entertain clients, ways to build a team, ways to team build, ways to lead that team. So that's really what it's at. Join me tomorrow. I'm going to hold a Cloud Architect webinar, and we will cover every single thing necessary to be an architect. And guess what? I can give you an interview if you want to see if you're ready. I can gauge your level of skills. I'll check out your LinkedIn profile if you want and guide you on it. And it's all free. Join us tomorrow. Chris from my team, please drop the link to that. Dennis, you have pretty good hands-on experience in VM and Dell Technologies, compute storage, and network. How would you perceive to be a solutions architect in AWS? Well, hands-on experience typically does not translate onto architectural experience. Now, you depending upon what you mean by hands-on experience. So, if you've been a planner, for example, you said network. So, if you're doing this, I'm going to count it as highly valuable experience that will carry over. So you said you were networking. So if you were networking, if you were determining like what the IP addressing plan of an organization would be, that would be good. If you've done any type of design where you're determining where your route aggregation points are to, reduce load on your routers, that would be kind of really good things. If you're planning how you would multi-home to multiple internet service providers and craft your internet routing architecture strategy, that would be very valuable experience. If you're determining how you're selecting between wide area network technology versus another wide area technology based on some business's needs, again, that's going to carry over. So if you're designing the remote access strategy for 100,000 users, that's going to carry over because that's architecture. Now, if you're going into a Cisco router, typing config T int gigabit Ethernet 0/0 IP address, put an IP address on it, no shut, router OSPF, and then you put the IP subnet in there, that's not going to really carry over much to the architect world. Now, if you could tell me in OSPF, what are the type of LSAs that exist? What does each LSA do? And if you could tell me what type of LSAs exist in which area, what type of areas, and when you would choose a stub versus a not so stubby versus a totally stubby area, that would be very valuable. So those are the kind of skills that are architecture-wise are going to come out versus the hands-on skills of how do I configure it. They just don't translate. And the reason they don't translate is I don't care if you can configure a firewall or not. But I do care if you know how to architect your demilitarize on, and if you know how to choose the right kinds of firewalls and how many layers of firewalls. And even though your next generation have firewalls have intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, are you going to use additional intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems because you're trying to aggregate your logs in the SIEM systems? Now, are you going to put any honeypots that are also out there to distract a hacker? Or are you going to do that? What are you going to put on the web servers to protect those servers? How are you going to harden those operating systems? What type of endpoint protection you're going to choose on those servers? How are you going to isolate and segregate your servers and your network from each other? That's going to be architectural experience. So that's really the key. And that's the problem. The hands-on engineering just doesn't carry over. Now, the hands-on design. Now, some engineers do design, meaning they really focus on the nitty-gritty design details. In fact, they may help the architects very often. And in every architecture, I bring some technical engineer, like the technical architect design engineer kind, who are going to be the technical experts that are going to know the little minor details that no one else would know. And they're a very good part of an architecture team. But here's what you need to be able to think about if you're really going to be a solutions architect for a client. You have to deal with the organizations, the people, the organization, and a strategic vision. Then you actually have to figure out the way the organization works. Then you need to figure out its strategy. Now, the reality is in today's strategy, it's always going to be some flavor of hybrid multi-cloud in 98%. Now, how do you design that strategy in the most efficient manner? Which workloads do you put in the data center, which are typically your highest performance, highest volume? Workloads like hardcore AI running 24 hours a day or hardcore computational things are typically much better, faster, and cheaper in the data center or the private cloud. By comparison, sporadic or agile workloads tend to be much better in a public cloud. So where are you going to put your systems? Now, what are you going to do? How are you going to, what kind of policy? How is one system going to fail over? So this is more architecture. So what I'd like to say is join us for tomorrow, and I'll actually assess you live if you want. And I'll be able to see if you're ready. And there's times I've worked with hardcore design engineers and I get on a webinar and I'll talk to them and I'm like, wow, you can explain this, you can explain this, you can explain this. Yeah, you're good to go. And then, but I'll tell you, most of the time, the people that have the most hands-on are typically the ones that struggled the most on an architecture interview. And here's why. When you learn a lot of how-to, it focuses on teaching you how-to skills. But architects don't how-to anything. It's all about planning skills. So the more you focus on planning, the more planning you do, the better you get at planning. I think the reason I moved into a lead architect role within 3 months of the time I started my tech career was a principal architect in less than 2 years and made it to the chief architect level in less than 5 or 6 years is as follows. My background wasn't tech. My background was medicine. And medicine and the architect role are the absolute two most critical, are the most similar roles in the entire world. And here's the reason. The doctor treats a patient. The patient comes to the office and says, I have a challenge. I have a problem. They have what's called the chief complaint. What brings you in today? My throat's killing me, okay? So that's the visit. So what do we do as physicians, nurse practitioners, physicians, assistants? We ask some questions about the person's condition and the person's set of problems. And from the information we get, we then do a physical examination. We make a diagnosis and a plan. So process. Someone has a problem. We ask some questions, we examine them, we make a diagnosis, and then we make a plan. What do I do as an architect? I meet with a client. They have a problem. And I help them solve that problem. What do? I ask them some questions. I ask them a lot of questions. I bring in a team of engineers. They baseline their systems. And then I make a diagnosis, and then I make a plan. Doctor interview a client, architect interview a client, doctor ask questions, architect ask questions, doctor make a diagnosis, architect make a diagnosis problem statement. I don't care. It's the same silly thing that we're going to call it. Doctor make a plan called the prescription, architect make a plan called an architecture. So these are, realistically speaking, a different set of skills, and I hope that makes sense. So please join us. Join us on one of those free webinars. And realistically speaking, we'll assess you, we'll guide you, and I'll give you every piece of help that I can to get you to your goal. And if you can do it with what you have, I'll tell you. And if I think you need training, I'll also tell you based upon the way you're able to respond to questions. How do I predict the impact of machine learning on the cloud? So, May, if I was going to look at, it determines what I really need to do. So if I need to run hardcore compute where I'm going to be needing to working all day, every day, that stuff's going to the data center. It's going to cost you so much less to do that in the data center than it's going to be in the cloud. So if I have an organization and they're very sophisticated in what they do, they're probably going to be able to do it better, faster, and cheaper in the data center. They'll be able to, for example, purchase something for one time for what the cost of a few months' rent would be in the cloud. Now, this is, of course, if the person has the sophistication, or the organization has the sophistication, the organization has the know-how, and the organization has the capabilities, the feasibility, and either they have the cash on hand, or they have access to financing or can lease it. So there is that. Now, the other thing, May, is that organizations and people that don't have the sophistication and don't know how to do these things may find it a lot easier to use some pre-made things that are inside of the cloud. So I think it's going to tell. Now, May, when we started training people here at Go Cloud Careers about 4 or 5 years ago, everyone we trained was a multi-cloud architect. And we taught everybody private clouds, public clouds, hybrid clouds. And even though architects don't touch the technology, I've had every architect I've ever trained build a private cloud. And why did I do it? Because I knew that at some point organizations were going to say, wait, I can buy this server for $300,000 from Dell, and it's going to cost me $6 million over 4 years to run it at AWS. I could buy this storage for this, or I could put it on Azure for this. And we knew that people were going to come to their senses once they realized that cloud computing was nothing more than renting space in another virtualized data center, the same kind they had for the last 20 years. But what happened is when cloud computing came out, it was sold as something special. Organizations made it sound the cloud providers made it sound simple, like, you don't need to manage a data center. We'll do it better, faster, and cheaper for you. And look, you wouldn't run your own power company, would you? Well, why would you run your technology? Fast forward, a couple of years, and guess what? The cloud providers are now running their own power companies and investing in nuclear power plants because it's the only way they can actually do what they actually need. So I kind of hope that makes sense to you of what's going on. So I think that you're going to see a lot of workloads going back to the data center. I also think you're going to see more workloads spread throughout more clouds, and that's what we're actually seeing. So we're seeing a right sizing of this. So high volume stuff, high powered compute that's going to run all day, every day, that goes into a private cloud like your VMware, your Nutanix, your OpenStack cloud. Now, your sporadic stuff, your agile stuff, like your website stuff that's going to go in and out, that stuff's beautiful for the cloud. These agile on and off workloads are really good for the cloud. Sporadic workloads that you need periodically, you need a lot of capacity, burst out to a single cloud, get it done and come back. And, there's nothing against an organization if they wanted to running all the machine learning in their data center and then training their systems on the cloud so they can train them real fast with access to all the compute capability on the cloud if they want to train their own small language model or their own customized large language model or whatever they need to do, where they could train it on the cloud and then pull their training data off of the cloud and pop it back to the data center. So realistically speaking, what are we really seeing, May? What are we actually looking at the impact of machine learning and what it really matters? I'm going to break that down into the career perspective. From the architects, more AI is more tools. It's like, okay, we've got a new way to help our business. It's like a new weapon being invented for an army. They want to get it as fast as possible. It's a competitive advantage. So architects, no matter what, always, and because architects are so in person, there's always opportunities for us. Now, I will say the people that are actually building these systems, I truly believe that these systems several years from now, many of these AI systems will be able to code themselves, will be able to configure themselves. So from the engineering perspective, we're going to need people with deep expertise, the ability to communicate, to collaborate, to solve problems, work with teams of people from all over the world with a different wired perspective. Those engineers will be worth their weight in gold, diamond, and platinum. But engineers that have very weak skills and have tried to get 50 certifications and never dove deep on anything, but just got a little of everything. Unfortunately, the AI is better than they are in most cases right now. And in 2 to 3 years, those types of roles will probably go away. More jobs for architects, great jobs for the best of the best of the best of engineers. And the real work for the architects are the kind of people we started training 4 years ago that know when to go to the data center, when to go to the cloud. Because the architect's best job is the ability to advise people where they should be. But machine learning is not going anywhere. AI is not going anywhere. Robotics are not going anywhere. And what will happen is we'll get more and more and more efficient with the applications that do this. And the technology will get better, better, and better. And at some point, it'll get better, faster, and cheaper. And I don't think we can even imagine how much this will impact our lives in a couple of years. I completely can appreciate your question. I'm grateful that you're here, May, and thank you for joining. Great name, by the way. Igor, hey, you've heard that we have a new security architecture program. Can I tell you more about it? You've been following us for a while and you don't know about it. So absolutely. So we created a security architect program, and like any other program we have at Go Cloud Careers, it has a couple of things that I'm pretty proud of. One is it covers all aspects of the career. So what do I mean by this? You will learn how to obtain the information, how to lean your architecture team, how to give your architecture presentations. You'll know how to respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. You'll learn how to sell. You'll learn how to build teams, and you'll learn how to the executive presence and business acumen. So we'll give you all of that. And we're the only people in the world that actually do that. Now, the other side is we're going to get pretty gritty in security. So we'll get involved in every aspect of security, whether it's risk management, whether it's IAM, whether it's network security, whether it's data loss prevention, whether it's cryptography, whether it's physical security, whether it's application security, whether it's data security. We'll get involved in all of it, and it's really fun. We'll get involved in business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning. We'll get involved in various architecture frameworks like Zero Trust and others. I mean, we dive deep, and we will teach you how to design enterprise security across clouds, across data centers, so you can do either a security architect job or cloud security architect job. We also have you meet, and we have a weekly live class where we cover just these design elements. We also have another weekly live class where we cover these business executive type skills. And we have 2 classes per week where you're mixed with the cloud architects. And here's the reason why. When the cloud architect groups and the enterprise architects groups create the architectures, you're going to be focusing on the security aspects of these architectures and lead the security initiatives as part of the architecture teams, just like you would in a real architecture. So you're going to be doing that. So basically, we cover the role. We have live training 4 days per week, plus usually we even have an extra day where students can come in and ask questions about the cost, like office hours. Now so there's 4 live classes per week. We also have a tremendous amount of video content and education that covers the entire role, along with a tremendous amount of supporting documentation that goes along with it. I will tell you that we cover these 3 certifications. We cover the CISSP because that is the big one in security. We cover the CISM, we cover the CCSP, and we cover these deep. And then we tie it all together with Zero Trust frameworks and pretty much anything that you would need. And then when you're done that, we even have elements where we talk about building your brand, training you for the interview, teaching you how to answer interview questions, how to control the interview, and even how to negotiate a higher salary. And it's pretty much my life's work. I've had other experts help put this together, and it came from my lifetime involved in network security and enterprise architecture. And I'm really, really proud of this. And it's on sale at 50% for right now. Are there any other questions for me? Miguel, this man is a gem. Thank you. The content that he brought to by this channel in just hours of search and compiled into a simple framework course. Thank you so much, Miguel. We try so hard. Thank you for all the content. I am so happy to hear this. So I really appreciate it. We try very hard to create as much content as we can. We do as much as we can for free. And then in our training programs, we do anything we can to actually get our clients to their goals. So I will see if there are any more questions. If there are not any more questions that popped in, I always am happy to see you. I want to remind everyone that tomorrow we have a completely free webinar on how to get your first cloud architect job. We'll cover the role. We'll talk about what we actually do. We'll talk about what employers are looking for. We'll talk about the skills that you need to have, what we need to do, and then we'll spend 60, 90 minutes answering any questions. Thank you so much, Kamal. And we'll go over that. In the description of this video, we've got guys on winning the interview, becoming a cloud architect, becoming a enterprise architect, becoming an AI architect, and building your brand certifications, and so many free and valuable resources. Please check them out. They're completely free. So I look forward to seeing you out, so many of you, on the webinar tomorrow. If you've enjoyed this session, maybe give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your technology career. This is Mike Gibbs signing off.